This is what I love about making connections. You know that verse where Allah says, أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبِ? Verily indeed, it is only in the remembrance of Allah that hearts find rest. Connect that verse to a verse that comes just shortly after it. After Allah reminds us that it's only through Him that you're actually going to find permanent rest, Allah will say just a few verses later in the same surah, Allah will say, وَلَوْ أَنَّ قُرْآنًا سُيِّرَتْ بِهِ الْجِبَالُ أَوْ قُطِّعَتْ بِهِ الْأَرْضُ أَوْ كُلِّمَ بِهِ الْمَوْتَى. Allah says, if there were a recitation that could cause mountains to move, the earth to split, or the dead to speak, it would have been this Quran. That the Quran could have this potential. Allah could have made the Quran do this. It is easy for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this reminds us of another verse where Allah says, لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله. That if the Quran were sent on a mountain, that mountain would not be able to handle the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It would crumble and become dust. It would become nothing. Now, when you look at these verses and you compare it to what Allah had just said before in Surah Al-Ra'd, that we only find rest through Him. So finding rest through Allah, right, is a fact. Now, what did Allah send us to find rest through Him? His words, the Quran. And Allah says the Quran could have been used for so many other things. The Quran could have been used to move a mountain. It could have been used to speak to the dead. It could have been used to split the earth. But what is the function of the Quran that Allah tells us? Allah tells us in so many surahs that this Quran for you personally is a healing. That this Quran is something you can find rest in you. That when your world feels like it's crashing, when you feel like you're the one falling apart, the Quran can hold you together. This is what the Quran is for your heart to feel comfort. Allah says, نَزَّلَهُ عَلَى قَلْبِكَ. The Quran was sent to the heart of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and your own heart can find comfort in it too. And what else does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? Allah says in Surah Az-Zumar that people who come to the Quran, it says ثُمَّ تَلِينُ جُلُودُهُمْ وَقُلُوبُهُمْ إِلَى ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. When they hear the recitation of the Quran, when they come to the Quran itself, it says their hearts and entire skin, so their entire bodies tremble and are just in awe, and their hearts soften towards the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Quran has this capacity to do so many things, but Allah in the Quran will focus on one thing, on its capability to revive you, on its capability to bring you back to life, and giving you hope in your own life, in circumstances that seem completely bleak and out of place and out of control. The Quran can hold you through that, can ground you through circumstances that you thought you had no ground. This is what the Quran can do for you. That's the focus of the Quran. Look what Allah says in the beginning of Surah Al-Anfal. وَإِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُهُ زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا وَعَلَى رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. That this Quran, when it's being recited to true believers, it only increases them in their faith. It only increases them in their conviction that Allah is with us and He will get us through this. So when you see all these verses where Allah says, "Lo this, if we have done this, if we did that," remember, well, what did He do with the Quran? He sent it to you. Rather than sending it to a mountain, which He could have, He sent it to your heart. He gave it to you. He wanted it for you. So remember this when you come to the Quran, that these words are for you to find hope, to find refuge, to find comfort. So may the Quran be that rest for you, inshallah.